Hi friends, my name is Bethany with Craft with Bethany, and on this week's episode, I'm going to share some things I learned from teaching a class for beginner sewists just last week. You heard that right. I actually learned a lot from my class that I taught last weekend at the fabric company. I had some amazing students. I had some students on Friday. I had even more on Saturday. We had so much fun. And this is actually what we made right here. This quilted tote bag. It is so cute. This is a panel that is available from the fabric company. I'll link it below. We did a drop-in lining, so there's no seams that have to be bound or anything like that. Made our own straps and everything, and it stands up on its own because we even learned how to box the bottom so that it's nice and sturdy to hold all of that Halloween candy, and it's a quilted trick-or-treat tote bag. It is so fun, so cute, and it was such a fun project for me to create for this class. The thing is, we had some students in the class that had never sewn on a sewing machine before, and it didn't even dawn on me to ask that question when they first came. Because, oh no, my pumpkin's nose came off. We'll talk about my pumpkin in a minute. It's all crooked. There we go. We'll talk about him in a minute. Anyways, I didn't even think to ask my students if they had ever sewn before. I made the mistake as a teacher to assume that people wouldn't sign up for a class. Even something as challenging as making this quilted tote bag, which I don't find challenging, but for someone who's never sat in front of a sewing machine, that's a lot of new, okay? It's all new, but that's a lot. And I have to commend them for signing up, coming in with confidence, coming in with the mentality that I'm going to learn something today. They came in with a mentality of, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm very curious about this craft and hobby. I want to learn, and I'm open to learning. And if I come out of this with a finished project, great. If not, I at least tried, and now I know. And none of my students were brand new to sewing on Friday, but they had never made a bag before. They had only done quilting. So for them, this was like a soft entry into a bag because we did straight line quilting on foam, which they'd never sewn through before, with a panel, and they learned how to make the bag, but they had confidence with using a machine. Now, one of the girls had only been sewing for about a year, but she did great. And I gave her some very helpful tips that you would need to know if you've never done anything but quilting. You know, they're used to, following these kind of set guidelines and rules of using a 1/4 inch foot and your 1/4 inch seam allowance. And they never really vary for a whole lot from that. And so to come in to do something like this, it's very different. So I want to share some tips that I shared with them as beginners because it really helped me take a step back even further than I had planned to with my teaching. And that's one thing that's really important about being a teacher is being adjustable, flexible, and meeting your students where they're at. I had students that had sewn before and had students that had never sewn before. And I think on Saturday or both days, no one had ever made a bag before. And this is a great beginner bag project. So I was like, okay, we've got a lot of diversity here, but we have some things in common. So I know what I definitely need to focus on. But having 3 students on Saturday that had never sewn before kind of caught me off guard. I'll admit it. I was so excited for them, but I got a little nervous because I was like, oh, they're going to need a lot more of my time and attention than some of the other students, and I really want to be there for everybody. Well, I shouldn't have assumed that. They picked it up so quickly. They, like I said, came in with the mentality of, I'm here to learn. I'm open to learning. I'm going to ask questions. I'm not going to sit here quietly. And some of them were super shy and quiet, but they still came up to me and said, hey, can you help me with this? Or, hey, I'm having an issue with this. And then I would go help them. So maybe they didn't feel comfortable, kind of hollering at me from across the classroom, but they came and found me and I was like, absolutely, let's go knock that out. And so I worked with them one-on-one for that few minutes and get them back up and rolling. So I think some of the tips that I shared with them from the jump of our class really helped them be able to find their confidence throughout the project. By the end, they didn't need me. Like I said, okay, like this is the final step. We're gonna sew this seam shut, and where we turned our bag right side out. And I showed them how to fold it in, and they took their clips and clipped it, and then they knew how to move their needle over to get a top stitch, and they did it all great. And I was just like, I didn't have to go. By the end of the class, I wasn't holding anybody's hands. And so I don't know, I was really, really proud of them. And I told one of them, I said, you picked this up way fast. Like, I feel like you might have lied to me and you've sewn for at least a year. And she's like, no, this is actually my first time in front of a sewing machine. I don't even own one. And I was like, I think you just found your new craft and your new hobby. And she's like, I think so. This was so much fun. So she signed up to come take my next class in November. And, again, this is how people try things out. It's like test driving a car, right? You don't just like go buy a car without test driving it. You want to make sure it's the right car for you and that you're comfortable driving it. And I feel like it's the same with getting into a new craft. You kind of want to test it out. And investing in a sewing machine is a lot of money. Taking in-person classes is an ideal way to test out if sewing is something you want to do. One thing I would recommend, though, is if you're very new to sewing, I would recommend reaching out to the teachers of that class and say, I've never sewn before. Should I come in beforehand and maybe get a little quick lesson on how to use the machine before we get started? Or what do I need to know? Or is this the right class for me to start with? Is there a more beginner friendly class depending on the project? So I think that would be helpful to some of the teachers, but and also help you feel a little more prepared walking into a class. But I mean, they did a great job. And you know what? Toot toot. I will toot my own horn because as a teacher, because I feel like the tips and advice that I gave them and how I teach and the energy that I have and the positive attitude that I have and the encouragement that I give all plays a critical role in someone finding success with sewing. And I feel like that is something that I have really worked hard to get good at so that I can help others like you guys, whether it's here on YouTube through the Sewing Help Hotline that I just set up, or in-person classes or social media. I love helping people because I have a true belief that anybody can learn to sew. Anybody can do it. Anybody could have made that bag with me, whether they had ever sewn before or not. And this past weekend totally proved that. So before we dive into some of the tips that I shared with them as a beginner, things that I hadn't shared with people in a long time because I just honestly hadn't sat down with a beginner, like true beginner, like first time in front of a sewing machine kind of beginner in a really long time. And so it kind of was a great opportunity for me to learn from them. So before I share that, I want to take a quick minute and say, if you watch my previous video, you know that I started a Sewing Help Hotline. It's 1-833-LETS-SEW. I'll put it across the screen here. It is a free, toll-free hotline. You call in, you hear my little message, you leave a voicemail with your sewing question. It could be anything from, what needle should I use for this type of project? Or, what's a good machine that I should upgrade to because mine doesn't do all the things I want to do? Or what does this foot do that came with my machine? I don't know how to use all these accessories. Or I'm really struggling with sewing satin, or zippers are overwhelming me, or, I could go on and on all day. Like, there are so many questions. What's a sewing technique that you want to learn, that you feel like you learn well from me and you want a video from me about it? I'm happy to create that for you. So that's what the Sewing Help Hotline is for. You call in, leave a message, I listen to your message, and I respond with one of these videos, and I post it to my YouTube. So not only does it help you and give you visual support to answer your question and show you exactly what I'm talking about, but it also helps other people who also have that same question, because I can guarantee you're not the only one with that question. So please take advantage of the Sewing Help Hotline. It is for you all. I created it for the sewing community. I want it to be a tool that you guys can lean into. I know you can probably search on YouTube for just about anything, but if you have someone like myself that you follow and you're like, I like learning from her. I like the way she teaches. She makes it very clear. And this is all things that I get in my comments on my YouTube video. So I'm not just making this up. But if you feel like you connect with me as a teacher, then I want you to use this hotline as a resource to connect with me more. Ask me those questions. I want to be able to give you a personalized answer. And this is how I hope to do that. So it's a new thing I just started. It's available now. Over on my website that I just launched earlier this month is, or end of last month, it's craftwithbethany.com. I'll put that here as well. There's more information about the hotline there. You can also book one-on-one sessions with me if you need thorough instructions or help, or just getting started. It's there for you. There's some great beginner-friendly projects. There's some videos there. There's blog posts and tips. I mean, there's so much more that's coming to that website. I'm so excited about it. So please take a minute after this video to go check it out. There is a link to it in the description as well. All right, so let me share a couple of things that I thought really helped people in my class this past weekend learn a little bit more about the machine that they were using and how they can do those same techniques with their machine. So for example, everything we did in this project is straight stitching. Everything was straight stitching. So some of them only had straight stitch machines at home. We use computerized machines. I have one of them sitting right here that I have at home. And they were like, oh, this thing has way more features. And I'm like, yeah, but it still does a straight stitch just like your machine at home. And this entire project is a straight stitch project. So I taught them, one thing that I taught them is the importance of keeping as much fabric under the foot as possible when you're sewing, because it's going to give you more control. So to help explain that, I'm going to take the camera over to the sewing machine and show you what I mean and how you can utilize the features of the machine to make it easier on you to sew something. So let's go check it out. So one thing that I taught my students over the weekend, especially the ones that have never sewn before, but I ended up sharing this information with all of my students because a lot of them had never been told this before. And this is just my best advice. And honestly, I'm sharing this because it really helped them. So it might help you. If you like to do things a different way, that is totally fine. At the end of the day, if you get the same stitching result, it really doesn't matter how you get there, but you should be open to trying other ways because it actually might be a better way, or you might have a better way. But whatever is easiest for you and giving you the success in your project is all that matters. But when you're brand new and you don't know anything and you have nothing to compare it to, I hope this advice helps. So one thing I really taught my students was, we have a needle here, but we can move the needle left and right to a different position. So on a sewing machine, whether it's computerized like this one or it's a mechanical machine, if you are in the straight stitch position, which this is the straight stitch and that is what is shown here, this is where you change your length of your straight stitch, okay? So the default is always 2.5 millimeters. That's the default length for a standard straight stitch. But if you see this one right here, where it kind of has like the zigzag, yours might look a little different, but that's the stitch width. So this is stitch length, this is stitch width. And if I change this one, do you see this over here? It's moving my needle to the right. Or I can move my needle to the left. Or I can move it anywhere in that area that I want. Now on this machine, the center needle position is highlighted by putting a box around it, just like the 2.5 is the default, and they put a box around it. So that's how you know on this machine that that's the standard straight stitch, or you could just click back to that. So let's say I had it all the way out to here, and I click the center needle straight stitch, it takes me right back to it. Again, this is why I like computerized machines. It takes some of the guesswork out of it, especially for beginners. So with knowing that you can change the stitch width on a straight stitch, and that ends up moving the needle position, then you can decide where you want to sew. Now, some mechanical machines may have a dial like up top or something or somewhere else that say needle position, and you might only have 3 needle positions like left, center, right, and that's fine. we can work with that. So let's go over to the machine and tell you why I think needle position is such a critical thing to learn on a sewing machine when learning to sew, and it can be applicable to all different types of sewing. Okay, so I've got my fabric here, and I'm gonna fold it over so I can sew on it, just like as if I was sewing two pieces of fabric together. And now that I've got my fabric folded, I'm gonna put it under the foot. Now I want you to notice a couple things. One, I'm lining the right edge of my fabric. So I'm lining these two layers up with the right edge of my foot, okay? So this foot becomes my guide for some of my stitching that I'm doing. Then I also, if you can tell, I'm not starting right at the edge of the fabric. I'm starting in from the fabric. By doing this, I'm preventing a few things. One, from my thread getting tangled before it ever hits fabric. Two, from my bobbin getting nesting underneath. Three, from my fabric getting jammed down underneath in these feed dogs, which will happen if you start like right at the edge of the fabric, okay? Especially on challenging fabrics, it's just gonna wanna push it down in. It needs something a little more stable. So having the fabric positioned along the right edge of your foot is putting as much fabric under the foot as possible so that you're getting more control of the fabric as you're sewing. Your feet, both sides of your feed dogs are being utilized to help feed the fabric through in a straighter line. So you're going to be able to create a straighter stitch by putting more fabric under the foot, utilizing those feed dogs, utilizing the foot to guide the fabric. So what I mean by that is I'm lining up the edge and I'm going to sew. Now I'm going to start with a couple stitches, and then I'm going to use my back stitch, and that's going to take me all the way to the edge. And that is how I'm getting a beautiful stitch every single time. I started in a little bit, I did my back stitch, and I kept going. I have no curling in on the end or nesting or anything. It's nice and easy. My fabric looks just like how it was when I put it down to be sewn. It shouldn't come out with bunching or pulling or gathering or anything. It should be nice and smooth, front and back. If it's not, then you need to reposition your fabric. You need to maybe adjust your stitch for the fabric that you're sewing. Make sure that your thread and your bobbin are threaded properly. So I just wanted to show you that you can get a really nice straight stitch when you have something easy to guide. Now, are there times where you're going to need to move the fabric to follow, one of these lines or marks or whatever? Absolutely. But when you're a beginner and you're doing simple things with simple stitches, you want to know where to look. And people want to look at the needle or this tiny little notch right in the center. And that's really hard. Utilizing the edge of your foot and moving your needle can make a huge difference. So this time I'm going to line up my foot and my fabric in the same place as before. But this time I'm going to move my needle all the way over to the far right position. And again, I get a beautiful stitch. It's perfectly parallel with my previous stitch, but it's closer to the edge. It's much closer to the edge. And it looks really nice. We can put the fabric back in, same spot, and we can move the stitch or the needle all the way over to the left. See how easy that was to get 3 perfectly parallel lines? And that's all because I kept my fabric following the same edge the entire time, and I moved my needle position every time. So you too can get straight stitches and sew in a straight line if you use your foot and your needle position to make it easier on yourself. It really can be that easy. The last tip I want to give you in this video today that I helped my students with is some of them would have some nesting underneath or some skip stitches on top, and I want to tell you what to address when you have those happen, because we all have them happen, and it's very common, and it's nothing that you did. It's just maybe there's an issue with threading. So for example, this is the top stitches right here. If I was having an issue with these top stitches, maybe they were skipping, maybe they were looking funky, I don't know, maybe they were looping, it could be several things. If there's an issue with the top stitches, then there's an issue with your bobbin, most likely, okay? And now, on the back, if there was an issue on the back of my fabric, the side that was down, right? So if there was an issue with this side of the fabric and these stitches, then it's actually a problem with my top thread that goes down through the machine and through the needle. So just remember, there's an issue on top of your fabric in the stitches. It's a bobbin or bottom issue. Bottom bobbin issue. Top to bobbin. Top to bobbin. That's hard to say. If there's an issue with the bottom stitches, then it's a top thread issue. When in doubt, take the top thread out, take the bobbin out, and rethread. The last thing I'm going to share with you, and this is because I care very much about your machine and your investment, and I know many people do not do this, but you should. The last thing I want to share with you is how to remove the thread out of your machine. Now, you're probably thinking, Bethany, I'm just going to grab it and pull. Please don't. So the last little tip I'm going to share with you is how to properly remove your thread from your machine. Now, your bobbin just pops right out, whether it's a front load bobbin, a top load bobbin, maybe it comes through the side here, that just comes right out. But your top thread is woven through your machine. It like weaves through several different key points, and these are moving points in your machine. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of them. And you're probably thinking, Bethany, I can just grab this and yank and it'll come out. I mean, it will come out, but technically you should never pull your thread out of the machine the opposite way it went in. It's actually really not good for these components inside the machine. What you should do is take a pair of scissors, snip your thread, and remove the thread from the needle just as it's meant to feed through the machine. So I've taken that thread out, and now I have this thread taken out of my machine. That's how you should remove your thread. Do we always do it that way? No. But I highly encourage you to create some best practices and good habits if you're first starting out. And that is by removing your thread the right way. Do not pull it out and let it all feed back through here. It can really mess up some things in here. Snip your thread, then you can take this off and pull the thread tail out through the needle, just the same way it would normally feed through the machine. All right, my last tip I'm going to share with you today is about needles. I literally had someone send me a message one day and said, I know you talked about needles on your podcast, and I hear you, and I'm sorry, but I am one of those people that still has the same needle in their machine since they bought it 3 years ago and has never changed the needle. Y'all, don't be that person. Don't be that person. It's like never getting a new tire on your car and letting it run flat. Like, it's not good for your machine. It's not good for your fabric. It's not good for your thread. It's not good for your project. It's just not good. And we want to have the best sewing experience possible, and that means changing your needle. So if you hear nothing from this video, I hope you hear this. you should change your needle every 6 to 8 hours of sewing. That's sewing time. So with like this pumpkin project right here that I did, it took a long time to make. It was probably 6 to 8 straight hours of actual sewing. It's a lot. And I used a denim needle. I knew it was going to be a lot of work. I knew it was going to be a hard, challenging project to sew through because it is rope. It is rope. So I used a denim needle, but I made sure I put a brand new needle in. And when I was done with this project, I took that needle out and I disposed of it safely because I knew it wasn't going to be much use to me beyond that. So I highly recommend changing your needle every 6 to 8 hours. So keep some extra needles, and you do also need to be changing your needle based on the type of project you're doing. So obviously I use like a denim or heavy duty needle for this, but just a universal 80-20 was absolutely fine for this. Or if I'm doing some quilting, like a quilt block, and I'm piecing, I might use a microtex needle. When I do like traditional quilting, I might use a quilting needle. If I'm working with leather or faux leather, I'll probably use a leather needle. There's so many different types of needles out there, and I highly recommend that you get some small packs and get some variety. You can kind of collect these as you start expanding your sewing into different types of sewing. Obviously, you don't need to be buying denim needles if you're never going to do heavy duty projects and you're just quilting. But you never know. You never know. So again, I highly recommend that you take some time to learn about not just the outcome of what you want to make, but the importance of setting yourself up for success. Learning the features of your machine, learning the importance of things like needles, learning and understanding the importance of cleaning your machine. You've seen me do videos before on that. You know I'm going to preach about that. You've heard me probably say this before. Your machine has a motor inside of it, just like your car has a motor. So think of it this way. You give your car an oil change. So maybe you need to kind of clean this out and drop a couple drops of oil in it here and there. You clean out your car, you go through the car wash and use the little suction vacuums and whatever. You should be doing the same with this. All those threads and fibers that come off of it go down into the machine more than you realize. They collect little dust bunnies, and those can actually cause some serious damage to your machine and make it really hard to sew certain things in certain projects, and it really shortens the lifespan and longevity of your machine. And it's an investment. We spend good money on these. We want to make sure that they all last a long time. The last thing I'm going to say about that is two things. Never use compressed canned air on your sewing machine. You know what I'm talking about. The things that people used to spray all over their keyboards on their computers. People use them on your sewing machines, and while some of it does blow out, it actually pushes more further back into the machine than you could ever get to. And you will end up pushing it back into the motor. You really should never, ever use compressed canned air. First of all, it's horrible for you to breathe in. It's not just air. It's aerosol, and it's not good for you to breathe in. Secondly, it's not safe for your machine. So I would actually recommend just tossing all of that and don't keep it in your home. And that is my opinion on that. But as someone who's worked very closely with the service department at some Singer, Husqvarna Viking, sewing machine brands, they would also vouch that you should never be using compressed canned air on your sewing machine. I actually did a whole video on this for Singer's YouTube channel. I'll link it below. It's really critical that you take care of your machines. The other little tidbit that I would say is if you're seriously sewing on your machine, you should get it serviced once a year. If you're sewing on it periodically, just make sure it's clean. Make sure you keep it covered when you're not using it, so it doesn't get more dust and build up on it. But you should probably be okay with getting it serviced every 2 years or so. But get it serviced, because even if you're not using it, it's drying out and that oil is not going to be there when you are ready to use it. And that's what keeps those belts operating well, or those different moving parts, so that they're not rubbing and they're actually moving properly. So there's a lot that goes on inside those machines. I mean, they make beautiful things with us, controlling them and everything, but we've got to take care of them. It's an investment, just like your car needs an oil change and a good car wash every once in a while. These machines do too. So with that being said, I want to talk to you a little bit about my pumpkin. I know it's been sitting here staring at you this whole time, and I have to say, this is one of my favorite projects I've ever made of all time. And that is hard because I've made countless projects and some things that I'm really proud of. But this one right here probably takes the cake. It truly does. First of all, it's a labor of love. And I have a whole tutorial on it available on my website if you would like to go get it to learn how to make it yourself. This is rope. It has a lid. And I put candy in it. It comes out for every Halloween, but it is rope. I'm going to hold it up close. And the rope is wrapped in fabric, quilting cotton fabric. And I teach you how to do this. I teach you how to make the stem. I teach you how to make these like little cutout applique leaves and use decorative stitches on those. And I teach you how to make the whole basket so it makes a nice curve. Look, my candy's kind of, there we go. Make a nice curve. Now, the felt face, this is felt, so like it just comes off. It does, you know, you can attach it if you want, but I like to be able to take it off and keep it inside. And then that way I can keep my basket out after Halloween through Thanksgiving if I want, because it's a pumpkin. So yeah, I teach you how to do all of this. It's super cute, super fun. It's definitely a more challenging project. And I did this entire project on the Singer heavy duty machine. And it was great. It went so well. I have to say, I'm so proud of it. I've had so many people ask me if I would make them one, and the answer is a resounding no. It is a labor of love. It took a lot of work, and it's a one and done for me. But I've had so many people say that they want to try to make rope baskets that look like this. And so I've got the tutorial over on my website. I'll link it down below if you want to go get it and check it out and try to make one yourself. I am going to be releasing a video with tips on how to sew with rope and make different shaped things like coasters, bowls, and baskets. It's not going to show you exactly step by step how to do this. That's what that other tutorial is for. But between the tutorial and that video that I'll be releasing soon, you'll be able to conquer this. But it is a labor of love. This project was actually featured in the Better Homes and Garden Halloween magazine a few years ago. It had like a full page spread with Singer sewing, and it was the first time I've ever been published. And I think that's also why it holds some sentimental value for me. But I am really proud of it. And y'all, this thing has traveled with me in my suitcase to like HSN and been a sample that I've had on TV before. And it has held up super well. So I'll bring it a little closer so you can see it. And it's big. It's big. It's big. And it's so fun, and I absolutely love it. So I had to show it off and let you know that the tutorial for my pumpkin is over on my website if you want to go grab it and enjoy it. I hope you do. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. And this week I'm heading to the sewing retreat, Lynn's Handmade Bag Making Retreat up in Wisconsin. Never been to Wisconsin before, so I'm excited to go check it out. And we're going to be sewing up a backpack pattern. Super excited about this project. I've got mine sitting right over there. I have been hiding this bag from you for months because I've had mine done for months. And it is beautiful and stunning. I have used it every single day since I made it. It's the nicest purse, nicest bag I've ever made myself. And it was absolute dream to sew up. And Lynn's just does a fantastic job making these patterns. She thinks of everything and the usability. It's just stunning. So I'll be sharing more about the retreat in a video next week, but I had to let you know I am running out the door tomorrow to catch a flight. Actually, when you're watching this video, I'm already at the retreat right now. So I'm filming this on Tuesday, my birthday. So today's my birthday that I'm filming it, but you're watching this on Friday. So I'm at the retreat right now. And going to be sharing all about that next week. So thank you for tuning in. I hope if you are a beginner and you've never sewn before, that you take some of these tips, and maybe you've been sewing for a while, but you've never had someone sit down and share these tips with you. You wouldn't know what you don't know. And this is why I share the way that I share, because there's just so much to learn. And I know it can feel overwhelming, but if I can just share a few tips here and there at a time, it's not so overwhelming. And every time you go to do something, you're like, oh wait, Bethany said to move my needle over and keep my fabric lined up with my foot. Like, even just little tips like that can make it so much easier, especially working with challenging fabrics. So with that being said, I'm going to let you guys go. But before I do, don't forget, the Sewing Help Hotline is here for you. So please use it. And I will see you soon. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because if I'm not answering your question, I'm answering someone else's, and you might want to know that too. All right, guys, have a good one. I'll talk to you soon. See you next week. Bye.